Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of Ferris Makes Emulators. This is our first episode of the year, and I'm particularly excited about this because I just realized Rustual Boy is over 1 year old now. We actually turned one year old on December 9th. I didn't realize that I had started the project that soon even. So that's kind of funny actually. But yeah, here it is, the initial commit. December 9th, 2016. And it's literally just Hello World. And I think that's pretty cool. Went from there to a working emulator that almost supports all games, including this stupid Mario Tennis bug. Which we did solve at the end of the year, and I'm super happy about that. So yeah, I think it's really cool. By the way, hi to guys in the chat. 8 Little Bits Skeleton, you guys are consistent, by the way. Thanks a lot for that. Mr. Liquid, Metal Voids, SK Thez, Evil Dark Second, Dur2, Ms. Visor, Michael McMillan. Thanks, Iron Flame, for the sub. Phil Daddy 69, Love Like Semtex. Awesome. So there's a reason why I called this stream 1 year of Rustual Boy. First of all, I want to go over kind of where we're at after a year. And I want to talk about a couple other things that I also fixed since I stopped streaming last year. Because I did fix a couple bugs. And that was pretty cool. I also want to talk about kind of the goals for it moving forward. They haven't changed much. I just want to revisit what they are sort of on stream. And then I don't know what I want to focus on trying to fix next, because I'm not really sure where to look. But we'll see. Anyway, at this point, I still have... We can look at the game compatibility. That still makes me happy. Oh yeah, look at all those hearts. Gotta scroll down to see them all. They don't even fit on one screen. Basically, a lot of stuff here works. The stuff that doesn't, in Galactic Pinball and Golf, they're mostly due to, like, the samples play at the wrong rate in Galactic Pinball, same with Virtual Bowling. I'm starting to suspect the timer again for those, actually. Just because I think at one point I actually went in and I set all the instructions to take one cycle, and the sample still played at the wrong rate. It didn't seem to affect the playback rate. So I'm wondering if that's timer bound. So I got to dig up the old notes that we made about that, because I did make a bunch of notes at one point where I just looked enough into the play routines to see, like, okay, this sample playback has to be at this rate for this to happen, and a couple other things. And now that we have this awesome testing rig, by the way, let me hide the VB cam since we're not using it. I would like to revisit that, see how that works, and just kind of use this testing rig to just take a bunch of notes, is I think kind of the only really way to do that, because when you're working on the timer, the only thing you can really compare it against is another timer, which should be the CPU, but I know that due to basically bus weights and things like that taking a deterministic amount of time, but an amount of time that we don't emulate accurately enough in that area to be able to simulate properly. I don't think that'll be... Like, I have doubts about being able to write kind of a regression style test, but I definitely think against the actual hardware we can take a bunch of notes and see what's going on at some point. So I want to look into that at some point. There's also, I think this Tolero Boxer, small audio glitches during screen transitions. I think that might be related. This game transitions to demo mode way too fast. I definitely think is related to the timer. Might also be interrupts again. We'll have to see. And then the last remaining game that doesn't work is Space Invaders Virtual Collection. The logic of this game seems to be okay. It's just that the lasers aren't visible. So with this, I would expect either some weird floating point case or some drawing error that I'm not sure. So it'll be interesting to see what that might be. Anyway, at one point, I made this Road to 1.0 issue. I made this on February 12th of last year, so this issue itself is almost a year old. And since then, my thoughts have not really changed that much. As you can see, we're still not at 1.0. I did put out a release at the end of last year and then fix some more bugs, so I kind of wish I didn't do that. But basically, whenever I push a tag that has a particular format, the CI will just take care of building releases. So I just pushed out a really quick, alpha release at the end of last year just because we had fixed so much stuff throughout the year, and I hadn't released one of these since February of last year as well. So I just thought I should do that. And it was also nice to test that this still works, so that's good. Let's see, where were we? Anyway, things still for 1.0 that I would like to do. libretro and RetroArch is a primary full-featured front end. That I still agree with, because I think we should lean on that as much as possible in order to not duplicate a lot of that work. Now, libretro and RetroArch, at least RetroArch, when I tried it about a year ago, it wasn't the greatest experience. I have a feeling a custom experience could actually provide, something a little bit easier to use and maybe better to work with. But I think that doing that is really, I'm a little bit less interested in trying to make a really good front end for this. And even if I did, I would probably use something like Qt. So for example, like the transmission torrent client has the core code, and they use a Qt client for, the cross-platform front ends. And I think that could work out really well for this emulator, but I'm just not that motivated to do that right now. And I think leaning on libretro and RetroArch would just make the most sense still. And then, of course, the CLI front end for something more minimal with a basic debugger. This I also agree with, because this is basically what we have already. So I imagine this in a development cycle, you would just open this on the command line, and it's still, faster to start up. It's the same emulator course. This is what you would use primarily for development. The debugger, I don't plan on improving that much, other than documenting it a little better, and maybe having it provide better error messages, but I'm not really sure about that. I don't think it's necessarily necessary. Oh, cool. I didn't know that they read out Daniel Collins' donation. I must have missed that run, actually. I think I did. But that's pretty cool. Dark Second would love to see more libretro stuff. Definitely, I want to use that. The reason I've been holding off is because I wanted to do this 100% game compatibility before that. But I'm wondering, honestly, if I should switch focus for a little bit in order to do some of that libretro stuff anyway, because it's all, as far as I'm concerned, all of this is work that we're going to do anyway. Which order we do it in isn't terribly important. I was just working on this first anyway. So I might actually switch on that just to get, I don't know, something kind of a fresh feeling for the project for myself working on it for a little while, and then come back to the gameplay playability. Especially because the last things I want to test, first of all, the video hardware, I actually want to fuzz that, just like we did with the CPU, and I think that might yield some interesting stuff, especially for corner cases that we haven't tested yet. And that may fix the lasers in Space Invaders. So that could be really interesting. But as far as the timer stuff, I know I want to dig deeper into that, but I don't really know how yet, so I got to kind of think on that a little bit more. As far as the other CPU stuff, that's just going to be more work, but at least it's pretty straightforward how to continue with that. And then there's going to be some interrupt testing as well, like what we were going to do after I found that Mario Tennis bug, and then stopped because I was feeling lazy that day. Stuff like that I definitely still want to do as well. And that stuff's pretty straightforward, but just got to sit down and take the time to do it. Anyway, I think that this is, of all the things left, just looking at how far the emulator is and the fact that getting people using it would actually probably help testing a lot. I don't know if people would actually use it, because I don't know how many people are actually interested in Virtual Boy as a platform, but it would be really cool to do that. I actually still, my ultimate goal would be to have the libretro core for Rustual Boy be the primary core that libretro would use, or that RetroArch would provide, overtaking Ben-Naphen, because I think it's a better core in terms of accuracy, but it's not a better core in terms of resource usage. That I know for sure, and that might hurt its sort of adoptability in that context. Especially for platforms like mobile, which I know that RetroArch supports. There actually being a Rust emulator might be a challenge, but I kind of want to just try to push this through those channels and see what happens. Also, in terms of documentation, that would just be nice to do before 1.0. Even stuff like here's what the command line options are, here's where you go if you have problems, all that stuff. I think honestly, I could get enough documentation out for this in a weekend if I just sat down and did it. But again, I've been holding off on that while the other moving parts are moving around, because that was another reason why I didn't want to focus on the libretro stuff up front, is because I knew that some of those pieces might move around if we had to make some architectural changes at this point. But now that a lot of stuff is fixed, I think the architecture of the emulator is actually pretty well stabilized, except for some data routing stuff that will affect performance. So I think like how we handle the frame buffer data right now could definitely be improved. But I think setting this up and then testing it in that context is probably the best way to do that anyway. But I think all of this still stands. I think this still makes sense. I don't really see any reason to change any of this, which is why I haven't touched this ticket, except for, updating the status of these things, just ticking these boxes as I've fixed these issues. Yeah, I've written some more notes on here, like game playability. Space Invaders seems to be the one that's missing still. I've got some notes on the libretro front end because one of my colleagues, Sebert, actually did a lot of this stuff a year ago. And then it's basically just sort of sat there since then, which is fine. I mean, I just appreciate the work. So we have a starting point is really the important thing there. So it'd be cool to take that further. Like, we're not actually starting from scratch. So it would be cool to work on that. I think also doing that might really affect the public perception of the emulator in terms of it being ready for people to actually use, which would be really cool. The other thing we get, like, not only do we get, I think just a front end that's easier to use for people, but we also get stuff like controller support, different kinds of monitor support, like different displays, all that stuff, full screen, all that kind of stuff. So it's really good. Dark Second, already matching the best other emulators. I think so too. Like, even though some of them play games like this correctly, like the intro sequence, for example, this is the only emulator that I know of that actually does that correctly. A lot, like, that's actually the case for a lot of things in the emulator, that we're the only one doing stuff correctly in a lot of ways, even though there's still some bugs. And I don't know if I want to release 1.0 with a lot of these bugs remaining, but I could definitely release like a 0.5 or something with the libretro front end. It just starting to get those out. Am I talking about finding goals that will justify the amount of time needed to fix all compatibility issues, or just finding goals to keep me motivated? I'm just talking about where the project's going to go after this. My goal still is to do this 1.0. So regardless of how long it takes, I want to get there because I believe that we can. I believe that we can in a reasonable amount of time. Even though I didn't expect the project to I didn't expect to still be working on this a year out after starting this project. I mean, even if the project takes another year, which I think it really wouldn't, famous last words, I would still be motivated to do it because this is still a pretty good emulator and there's a lot of interesting things left. Excuse me. I ate way too close to the stream time, so I'm just hiccuping and burping, and I'm just a disgusting mess right now. Anyway, also this comparable lower resource usage with other Virtual Boy emulators, I'm really interested in doing before 1.0. Because again, like targeting mobile targets and stuff, the emulator is just too slow right now. And it's usable for me doing this stuff and working on the emulator core. That's fine. But I would really like to improve that. So there's some profiling work that has to be done, some benchmarking, and I think that would actually be really interesting. And getting some real data on the emulator performance before doing that as well, I think would be really important. It's really not that much left. The only real wild card is this one, because we don't know what the problem is still. Now there is more and more testing, going into different parts of the emulator, and I have now built this awesome testing rig, so exploring this should go a lot faster than it has previously. But that's really the only thing remaining for compatibility. So it might make sense in the short term to focus on this other stuff first, because even if we get to like a 0.9, where this is like the only problem that we really know about, this and the, the stuff in the compatibility list, I think actually that's pretty good. And also it kind of puts this libretro stuff in the pipeline earlier, because I expect that to take some time and expect a lot of follow-up and discussions with the libretro guys, which I haven't spoken to any of them yet, because I wanted to get the emulator to a point where I felt comfortable doing that. And I think we're there. I think we've actually been there for a long time. I just never really took that leap. Not much more to say, actually. But I'm really proud of this project right now, to be honest. First of all, proud of it as an emulator, because it is a good emulator right now. I'm also proud that I've kept streaming it this long. I got a lot of flack when I started streaming this about not streaming the N64 emulator, and a lot of that's understandable, but a lot of that is also just crap. That I'm the one streaming, and I can stream what I want to, frankly. But thank you to you guys who are still interested in this as well, because I thought it was very interesting and wanted to share it too. And we've been able to contribute something pretty cool to the emulation scene. Hopefully that becomes more usable once we fix some of this other stuff. I still do, on the note of the N64 emulator, I still want to go back to that. I think I mentioned this on a previous stream, that what I think I'll do for that is take it to the point where it's like displaying a glitchy logo or something, like, so we get kind of a lot of the hardware pieces there. And then I won't want to go too much farther with that, because there are other guys doing a lot of that work as well that I don't think we could approach without significant time invested at this point. And I'm just not as interested in it at this point anymore. But I definitely want to go back to that, like I've been saying, for the last year and a half. And I think that defining kind of an ending point would be really smart for that. I also think in terms of the usefulness of the series, as in, streaming the entire process, that's a good place to stop as well, because the rest of the stuff after that is kind of just honing in on the accuracy of things rather than that initial kind of bring up, which would show someone enough of like at least how I would go about doing that. So I think it's pretty cool. Skeleton N64 Riot? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Yeah, I should just stream Just Dance. I'm totally going to stream more Earthbound, by the way. That game was really fun. And I don't mean to just say like screw you guys all. You know what I mean? Like I really appreciate that there's an audience for this and you guys actually think this stuff is cool. I really like that, and I get more out of streaming than just sharing the projects too. Like this is a very social thing for me, and I'm very happy to have you guys around. It's really cool. It's just this emulator's cool too, guys. No. But anyway, my point is this has actually been a super positive experience the last year. Plus a little more. And streaming in general is also something that I want to keep doing in the future. So even after this project and after the N64 project, I'm sure I'll find other stuff to do. So not too worried about that. But yeah, I think that's good enough in terms of where we're at with the project right now, except I didn't go over the other bugs that I fixed. Let's do that. There's actually not much. But they were really simple. I agree, Mad Moose. I especially want more technical ones. Which is at least part of why I want to do this as well. I think... Okay, first of all, I wanted to mention... that one of the reasons why I found the Mario Tennis bug is that I went through and started renaming all of the register names that we use internally in the emulator to official names. So for example, in the VIP, instead of things like display register or display control register, I actually went with DPCTRL, and that's just what it's called here. In all of the like official docs and also all the other emulators, because these are the real names of the registers. And I wanted to do that mostly to make it more clear. I don't think the more semantic names actually really helped as someone who's now significantly familiar with this hardware. And especially when you're cross-referencing different pieces of documentation, using naming that's consistent with those is actually pretty important. So I think this was a good move, and in doing so, that actually helped me find the particular section of the manual where it described what we weren't doing right that caused the Mario Tennis bug. So it ended up working out, being beneficial in that way too, but I was going to do it anyway. And I did do it anyway, and that's how we found the bug, so that's kind of funny. Anyway, so since then, and this is actually unrelated to the fixes because I did this a little more last night too. I went through the VSU and some other places in the emulator and also did the same pattern. So like instead of voice 1 through 6, it's called sound 1 through 6. And some of the things like the volume register is actually called LRV reg. And again, it's, you know, less descriptive to someone who's not familiar with the hardware, but I kind of feel like someone who's working on this is going to get a hold of the official manual, is going to look at some of the other pieces of documentation that are out there. And again, having this consistent is I think going to be pretty important. Plus down here with the register mapping, it kind of makes things all align, which is kind of neat. Not really an advantage, but I think it looks cool. I also did things like instead of the link port, it's now called the COM port because that's what it's actually called in the hardware. And then I renamed all the registers to match those too. Oh, I didn't know Pear was streaming, actually, Mad Moose. I would have loved to have seen this. I've been having some really cool discussions with him on Twitter. So I've been doing that, but basically, the last bugs I fixed, I think it was just this one thing. So I was thinking about how the interrupts were working in the hardware. I was reading the manual. I actually, because I went to the US to spend time with my family, and I brought my printout of the Virtual Boy dev manual, just because I like reading it in the physical format, and I had a couple hours to kill. And I was thinking about how the interrupts would work, and if we look at what I had previously, basically all this kind of logic, whenever we would raise interrupts, you know, some condition would happen, and if that was it, we would raise an interrupt. And we would only like raise an interrupt for this current cycle. So if you can kind of imagine, like every time the CPU ran a few cycles, this would raise an interrupt if something happened during those few cycles. But then it would be, then this interrupt line from the video hardware would actually go low again, which is actually wrong, I think. Or well, I know it for sure now. What we should have been doing is something a lot simpler. I can show you what this part looks like now. It's just easier to show it in here. Basically what I was thinking, because you have these interrupt pending, this interrupt pending register and this interrupt enable register. And interrupt pending, the bits of this get set whenever different kind of events happen. For example, game start or frame start, or the different frame buffers ending their display periods, or you know, some alignment stuff, or the drawing period ending. When one of those happens, then one of these bits gets set, and it stays set until the corresponding bit of an interrupt clear register is set from the CPU. So these kind of, if you OR all these together, you basically get whether or not an interrupt should fire. However, these can be masked by the interrupt enable registers. And whether or not these are enabled, these will still, you know, go from 0 to 1. It's just no interrupt will be raised from that. So I was thinking about how that would work, and in the hardware, the easiest thing to do in terms of like keeping an interrupt raised would actually be this logic here. Basically, you take the interrupt pending register, and this is all the time. You take the interrupt pending register and the interrupt enable register, mask them, and if the resulting value is not 0, then you hold the interrupt line high. Now, what this does is this allows basically any interrupt to happen, even if another interrupt is already being serviced. That can still, you know, set the corresponding interrupt pending bit, and then whether or not that's enabled, will actually send that signal to the CPU. The CPU will ignore that, for example, while it's processing another interrupt, but then as soon as it exits that interrupt, because this line will stay high, if there's, you know, some new event that happened, then that'll come back up. I actually thought about this because as we were writing that test, or failing to write that test, I should say, after fixing the Mario Tennis bug, I noticed that whenever I enabled interrupts, the Virtual Boy would just hang. And what I think was happening is that it enabled the interrupt, and then the interrupt handler would just return without ever acknowledging the interrupt by clearing the interrupt pending bits. So I think there was just an infinite loop that was happening between the instruction that the interrupt was triggering on and then the interrupt handlers, just back and forth forever, is what I think was happening. And this behavior would actually cause that to happen. Remember, it wasn't happening in the emulator, it was only happening on the hardware. And then I also just realized that, with this setup this way, again, like I kind of briefly mentioned, but I don't know if I said it explicitly, this allows interrupts where the event happens while another interrupt is being processed. This allows those interrupts to not be swallowed by the interrupt handler. And that actually fixed a couple things. That fixed... Which games did that fix? Here. It fixed Nestor's Funky Bowling. And the reason I think it was breaking... So the issue with Nestor's Funky Bowling was that before this... In fact, we'll have the note here. The Nestor's Funky Bowling the screen would go to black after the initial warning screen, but this actually could happen basically any time it would transition between screens. And then the game would just soft lock. And so what I think was happening here is that like an interrupt would be, being processed. Another interrupt would fire, but it would be ignored by the CPU for the time being because that interrupt was processed. And then when it returned from the interrupt, because the interrupt pending would never be seen from the CPU after that, it would just soft lock because it would be waiting for another interrupt to happen or be handled that never actually would get handled because it would get swallowed by the CPU. But with the interrupts being implemented this way, that would actually be handled as soon as the original interrupt handler would return. So it actually makes a lot of sense, and compared to something like the hardware timer, which also has an interrupt line that acts this way, where the interrupt line will be high, and it's high until you explicitly tell it that it's been handled. It kind of matches things. It matches the behavior that we saw in writing that test. It matches kind of a simple implementation of that in hardware. It fixes a game, and just generally makes a lot of sense. So I haven't tested it explicitly against the hardware other than, like, I haven't written a test for this against the hardware. But I'm definitely certain that this is correct. So that was pretty cool. I just fixed that, like, again on a whim when I was at my parents' house. So that was pretty cool. And that got us to 97%. So that's the only thing remaining is still Space Invaders. Hey, Studio C. So yeah, so that's really all that happened since then. And then last night I was just working on changing some register names a little bit again to make them match sort of the official names. In doing so, I didn't find anything else that was particularly interesting. I did find a couple register states where it's like if you were to read from a certain register and the register actually only has 6 of the 8 bits that it uses, the other bits are going to be 1. So I added some mask values that would make that the case in the emulator. It didn't fix anything, but since they were documented, I figured I should implement those while I was at it. Although what I would like to do is still go through the video hardware section again in order to see if there's anything I missed, because I'm wondering if this Space Invaders thing is actually because I'm not handling something correctly. Particularly, the video hardware has a fine mode, I think it's called. And a fine mode is very similar to the Super Nintendo's Mode 7, where you can give it, what are these? Fine. You give it some background X and Y and then these increment values, and every pixel it will add these increment values to the X and Y things. And you can change what these are per scan line, I believe this is. And yeah, per scan line here. And then it will calculate the new one. And that allows you to do things like stretching and scaling with these values, with these delta values being changed on a per scan line basis. So you can do some sort of fake 3D stuff. And I wonder if the lasers in Space Invaders are actually being broken because I'm not rendering this correctly. I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing wrong here, so I would need to look through stuff. And again, fuzzing the video hardware state, which is something that I still want to do, would definitely catch something like this, I think. So that could be really interesting. But generally, I'm actually super happy with how well the video hardware implementation here, at least in terms of like which pixels it draws and where, that's actually stood up pretty well. And it was a lot of this was just, kind of doing the most simple implementation of a lot of this stuff based on, documented aspects of the hardware. So pretty straightforward, but tends to work, or seems to work pretty well. Except maybe that Space Invaders bug. So that's kind of funny. But again, I'm not entirely sure, other than fuzzing the video hardware state, which I don't really feel like doing right now. I've been pretty tired since I got back from vacation. It's kind of had to take a slow ramp into things, which has been fine. Things are going well and I'm feeling good. That's what's important. But yeah, certain things are a little harder to get into than they have been previously. Not a problem, I think, but moving a little slow. But the more I think about it, and also because Dark Second said it, I think maybe working on this libretro stuff would be really good. Oh, was that an Earthbound ref? I didn't actually know that. I've barely played that game, by the way. I only played the other night, and then a bunch when I was a kid, but I don't remember it. Back when we would rent Super Nintendo games every Friday, so my parents could have time to themselves. Which I later found out was the case. I didn't realize that's why they did that. But kind of funny. Oh yeah, it was the map in the library. You're absolutely right. They did say something about that. I don't remember the exact line, but I totally remember them saying that now. That's deep. So just looking at the existing front end work that Sebert did. I'm just opening the issue list because there's still a bunch of this stuff that needs to happen, but I don't think it's... I'm actually happy that all these tickets are here because it's good to have this kind of to-do list because I don't really know what the status is for this. I think also this, if I remember correctly, this, where was it? Might just be scattered around here. But I'm fairly certain that he did his own bindings for a lot of these functions here. Which I don't think is a bad way to do it at all. In fact, that's probably the way I would have done it. But I think that there's a Rust package for this now. I have to see how well it's maintained, though. And it's licensed and stuff. But if I just search libretro backend here. So it was about a year ago that this was updated. But I mean, if that API hasn't changed, then it would be fine. And there might be enough here that I could, fork this and send PRs. It has the right license, and this could be a cool thing to do. It'd be interesting to play with some of this. This is kind of a cool way to do it too, where you implement this core trait. If nothing else, there's definitely other cores to look at, yeah. So yeah, maybe this would be a good thing to look into. Couple scripts here as well. I put RetroArch in path. That's probably just to help him test. Because really we're building this DLL here. If we look at this. So for those of you guys that are unfamiliar with libretro, I should probably not only refresh my own memory, but also bring this up. So libretro is a sort of standard for having an emulator as sort of a library. The idea is that someone who is writing an emulator would write a libretro core, which is really just like a dynamic library that exposes a given interface that's standardized here. And then various front ends, for example, RetroArch, would have a bunch of these cores available and then be able to select one and host those different system cores, depending on what you want to do. Huge advantages to this, mainly being that if you want to, pull up some emulators for a bunch of systems, you can just sort of download this one thing and then you have a bunch of systems available. I've always kind of liked emulators to have their individual UIs, but that's a personal preference. I definitely see the value in something like this, to have sort of an all-in-one front end. And I mean, regardless, you could also make, compile a specific front end with a specific core and it'd be fine. But anyway, you get a lot of stuff for free by doing this. You get, things like controller support, different multiple displays, full screen, save states, pausing and I think even rewinding and stuff, because I think there's the API actually has some stuff for that as well. It's not perfect like any system that's, this large and this democratically produced is going to have a lot of, warts, and it's been around for a while and it's a big project. So, things aren't perfect, but it's definitely more than good enough for its purpose, I think. So this would actually be really cool. Also, there's this thing called Laka, which I believe, open source game console. So it's a Linux distro that basically hosts a bunch of libretro cores as well. I would love to support this, for example, with Rustual Boy. So again, each game system is implemented as a libretro core, which the front-end RetroArch takes care of inputs and display. So simplifies all of that stuff. Basically, when it comes to the front end for an emulator, you can spend as much time as you can find the time to spend on it. Like in terms of different kinds of controller configs, all that kind of stuff. I'm a bit scatterbrained today. But my point is that a front end for an emulator can take, as much time as the back end, depending on what you choose to spend time on. And with this, I just see a really nice short path for one, getting a better front end on Rustual Boy, and two, getting Rustual Boy in the hands of more gamers, both of which are good for Rustual Boy as a whole, as a project. Now, I don't know that much about retro achievements. That could be kind of cool. I don't know that much about actually producing a core and getting it into this sort of ecosystem. A lot of that would have to go through and figure out. Hold on, let me close Slack. Sorry, all of you who have Slack, for these messages that are incoming. Oh, come on. I hate Windows notifications, by the way. In other news. So yes, the idea is that there's a wiki and a Discord, which we're getting started. Documentation. Again, the whole idea is that you would basically produce a DLL or a dynamic library with this particular interface. Controller mapping is, again, a huge thing that I really want in Rustual Boy that I just don't care to implement. But let me actually do this. Let me download the latest RetroArch and kind of show you guys around here. It's been a long time since I even tried this. Okay, I don't want an installer. I just want the download. This is kind of funny. I didn't realize they had builds for Windows 95. Oop. Daniel Collins ahead of the curve. I didn't see how big this was going to be. 150 megs. That's a bit large, but it's only going to take a couple minutes. Oh, and this actually keeps going. Online one, PS3, PSP, PS Vita. It's really cool how many systems this thing supports. Of course, it supports them for all cores that also support that. Yeah, they definitely do Dark Second. And yes, there is already a Virtual Boy core. It's powered by Manafin. Also, they have a bounties program, which is kind of cool. Although a lot of these are. Realistically not that worth it unless you would love to do one of these. But anyway. GTFO S2. By the way, a buddy of mine recently re-sparked my interest in a project I wanted to do for a long time. And that's to make our own handheld. He wants to do his own. I want to do my own. So we want to work together on a lot of like buying joystick parts and those kind of things to sort of test those out. But our systems are going to be fundamentally different. He wants to do his with basically Raspberry Pi and then breaking that out with breakout boards, and then doing case manufacturing. I want to do mine as an FPGA platform, so that I can just sort of swap in what kind of hardware it has and learn more about doing that kind of hardware with those languages. And there's a whole rabbit hole that's going to go down, but I do want to share a lot of that on stream as well. But right now we're just kind of, talking about doing it, and it's sort of more in the idea stage. But something like GTFOS2 would be a really good name if I make an operating system on there. So thank you for that. That's pretty rad. All right. This finished, so I'm going to go ahead and extract this stuff. Anyway, I've had that idea that I wanted to make my own handheld, mostly to learn about home manufacturing, because I wanted to do it with like 3D printing, and at that point I was looking into home reflow soldering and stuff too. But I just don't do enough of those projects for it to make sense to invest as much money as it takes to invest in those things. However, we recently got in touch with and visited the local hackerspace here in Oslo called Bitraf, and it looks like they have a lot of the stuff that we would need to do that. So, might be finally time to start a lot of that stuff. Anyway, I'll keep you guys posted on that, just because I'm going to be excited about it. So we'll see if that turns into anything particularly interesting. I need to delete my old RetroArch folder from like a year ago. Or not. I actually don't have to. Extract this to RetroArch. And now we wait a little more. The reason I want to pull this up now is because I want to both refresh my own memory, because it's been so long since I even looked into this, but also so you guys can kind of see what this looks like and what a potential Rustual Boy boot up experience would actually look like. Unrelated, if you guys know of any good kind of HDMI splitters, also SCART splitters, hit me up on Twitter or something, because I would love to stream playing Super Mario Odyssey. And SCART for like MSX and stuff, and the Amiga. So I'm just getting my controller here. That's why I'm moving around a bunch. It's dusty. You can tell how much of a gamer I am by how dusty my controller is. Where to go? RetroArch, where is it? There. All right, so this is what I got in the package. So you see all these lib things here. Hogweed, Harfbuzz. I think no, this should be in course, I would imagine, or maybe it gets those from some kind of store or something. I'm not actually sure. Anyway, let's run RetroArch. We have this. Welcome to RetroArch. Very sort of PS3 style. Also, I would like to set up my controller with this. I don't know how to do that. Driver input. Actually surprised this didn't work with my controller here. But think about that as a problem, for example. Like, oh, I started the emulator and my controller doesn't work. I would love for that not to be my problem specifically, like in terms of implementing that. Daniel Collin, I would love to support that idea. And I've also had the same idea, mostly because I want to implement a lot of these sound chips in hardware after seeing how relatively simple, for example, the Virtual Boy one is. Of course, I guess you're talking about actually putting the hardware on there. In fact, some of those sound chips even come with their own little box here. Like this is a Super Nintendo one. You may have seen one of these before. But I ripped this out of a Super Nintendo back when I was doing a lot of stuff for that, thinking that I might actually drive this with something similar to what you're describing. But yeah. Stuff like SID and YM you can just put sockets for. I think that would actually be really cool. So I like that idea. I'm just navigating this by the keyboard now. Use the game controls for both the menu and the game. Applies to the keyboard. Let's try it. Does that help? No. Oh, here we go. Now it works. Apparently I had a separate gamepad on here. That seems weird. Also, there's something backwards here. Ah. Maybe this isn't too bad if I just get used to it. Anyway. So we can do something like load a core. No items. So I can download a core. And here we have a bunch of these. This is actually pretty sick. For example, if we go to Virtual Boy, we have Beetle VB, which is Mednafen. But we can do something like... That's Mercury. So, I mean, wouldn't it be nice to have Rustual Boy right here, right before this Beetle one? I think it would be great. Hey, Pyro, Happy New Year. Oh, wow, Kyoto. Yeah, I know what you mean, Daniel Collin. I do too. I don't have a favorite IDE for Verilog. I actually, so I tried a little bit of Verilog a couple years ago, and I kind of enjoyed using it from Emacs, actually. But I actually plan to use my own language called Kaze, which I'm working on at the moment. It's not public yet, though. But it actually... I don't know if it's a good idea, the kind of ideas I put in that language yet. But I'm willing to try them out anyway with some somewhat large-scale projects. But we'll see how that goes. I'll keep people posted when I'm ready to share that publicly. But I'll probably start using that. And then I'll just use Sublime or something. Damn, Colin, I would actually be interested in buying that from you. That would be awesome. Kyoto, this is just RetroArch, so you could download this. Looking at this because my emulator I would like to make as a core for this. So Hey, Jura, how's it going? I haven't tried Chisel, but I've looked at Chisel, and I'm stealing some ideas from it. And it compiles to Verilog. It compiles to Verilog and also Rust. The language that I'm working on. I'm kind of being intentionally vague because I'm not ready for it to have much scrutiny yet, but I know that it will get some when I start putting it out there. Let's look at Vectrex. Although I don't have any ROMs for that, so I might as well do Virtual Boy. So I think I've downloaded that now, and now I can load it. Load core, load content. I'm gonna do this on another screen down here. And what I want to do here, I want to pull up Space Invaders. Apple loves hugs. Thanks for the follow. Oh, it's only showing one display here too, which is interesting. Okay. I've been saying that I haven't seen this emulator play that cutscene correctly. It just did, so good on them. Oh yeah, Daniel Collin, yeah, that would make sense. I figure I'll have to buy both parts of that. That does seem odd, Mad Moose. Also, I don't know which buttons to press here. I don't know if the mapping here makes any sense. Oh, that worked for something. So those lasers in the middle of the screen, those don't show up in my emulator. You're supposed to see how far they go. I don't think they show up at all when they get up to a certain point. I also started a graphical debugger to like look at the layers that are being displayed and stuff. That would actually probably help debug this if that's the issue in my EMU. I don't know if it is. Whoops, I didn't mean to close RetroArch. I just meant to change the system. Or change, whoops, not debug. Anyway. I still think it would be really, really cool to have Rustual Boy as one of these cores. A 248 core. 2048 core, I mean. Let's try that. Okay, it's kind of cute. Doesn't fit on my screen, but that's kind of neat. Anyway, enough of that. Yeah, RetroArch, ideally, if not RetroArch, some libretro front end should have VR support, and that would also be a total freebie for something like Rustual Boy. Oh, cool, Dan Collin. I'm going to keep that link open to remind me. Here's how to use it. Again, all this kind of documentation on like how to use stuff. I would love not to have to write. But I wanted to see documentation on libretro here. For developers, compilation. That's actually kind of cool. I had to teach you how to build all that stuff. And there's the core list. List of cores available. That's not what I wanted. Documentation is work in progress. No kidding. So I'll have to read through a lot of this. I'll probably spend the rest of the stream today just reading through a lot of this stuff because I can't really work on it effectively until my head has enough context to do that. But I think if we, I might spend some time on this weekend. Maybe not. We'll see. But if we spend the next couple streams working on this, I think we can actually make a lot of progress. Especially because we already have a lot of that done in the other, in Separate implementation of the libretro core so far. This is a to-do for the docs, isn't it? Okay, this is actually, this might be for developers of this stuff. I'm not actually sure. Or, okay, no, this is for users. I want to see what this looks like. Well, here's this core awaiting description. Where did you see the API thing already? How did I just totally miss that? I mean, I know you just gave me the link, but I want to see how you got there. Specifications, probably. Libretro. Yeah, that probably helps. Finding the API. Right, then we have program flow. That would be fine to output on a per sample basis, although you can totally do buffers. That would be faster. At batch callback. Yeah, serialized state, serialized and unserialized. These, for example, would be used to implement save states. And those are the kind of things that I also wanted to wait for with Rustual Boy, just because in case implementation of something changed, this would be different. But it may not be that bad, actually. Especially if we come up with a format for those that could be versioned. Because this should just serialize and deserialize into some blob. And like having a serialized structure that could be, versioned and expandable could solve that problem largely. So I wouldn't expect that to be too bad. So I guess that's about it in terms of implementing the stuff that's needed. Would need to see some more about this stuff too, though. And also, okay, that didn't work that one time. Is that it? That's all we get for about? Yeah. I'm really curious how to get one of these cores in there. It did say that was in RetroArch. It did say latest cores. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can dig more into that. Making it work first is probably more important. Okay, actually, here's a PDF about this. That's probably quite helpful. Oh, that wanted also to give me a PDF here. No, I don't want to download it. I'll look at that later, I guess. Vectrix emulator as lib retro core. Nice. So there's actually a fair amount of info on this stuff. Cool. I'm curious about their Patreon too. Not bad. By any means. That's a crazy goal. Anyway, really cool stuff here. I think I might actually stop streaming today. Now. Because after reading this, I think we know the way forward is just to start. First of all, I want to take Cerberus implementation here, and download that, give it a shot, see where we're at with that. And I just don't feel like doing that right now. So we'll do that next, and then that'll be the starting point. So I guess next couple streams probably be working on this, which I think is a good way forward. Again, looking at the stuff we want to do. So we'll work on that for a bit, and then we'll put the game compatibility thing on hold for a little bit, and just see what this takes and see what kind of core we can make. Next couple streams will probably be a little more upbeat from my part, at least. Just getting back into the swing of things, as well as having more familiarity with what we're doing in terms of implementing this stuff. So that should go pretty well. Exactly, 8 little bits. Hey, G Superland. Yeah, serialization is optional, so we could start without it and start adding those kind of features. I think that could be pretty cool. But yeah, I think we'll start that next week, or well, I might start it before then, but that's what we'll work on next week. And I actually expect that we can get pretty far with this stuff pretty quickly. But today, I think I'll head out. Anyway, thanks guys for hanging out, and should stream as well normally on Sunday, and then we'll be back next week. Also, last thing is I may stream some Earthbound stuff. I don't know if you noticed, but my microphone is on the wrong side, and that's because I have my Super Nintendo stuff set up still. So that could be cool. Anyway, thanks again, guys, for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.